Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are at the start of an exciting new series. I am so excited to get this all kicked off. We are doing a special series in co-sponsorship, not only with Chris and Mai's organization, 1776 Forward, the Institute of Liberal Values, where we normally partner and who hosts all of our wonderful events. And we are also now collaborating with the Free Society Coalition. And we're going through a series of questions. This was something that the Free Society Coalition actually came up with. They were inspired by the fact that we are coming into the anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And so we're going to do a whole series thinking about this connection between the Declaration, whose anniversary we're going to be celebrating soon, and then also free speech. So we have a series of guests coming up on this little sub-series where we'll be looking at the links and the connection here. And today we're so excited. We have Marsha, but I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to introduce you to Marsha, and we will get started.
Great. Thanks, Joya, and thanks, Marsha, for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
It's great to have you. And just a little bit more about this series. Yeah, as Joya mentioned, we're super excited about it. It's in sync with the pending 250th anniversary, quarter of millennia. That's quite an achievement and something we're celebrating for all of us who value everything America stands for and hope to preserve and advance it going forward. And the Free Society Coalition is an umbrella organization of organizations like ours to bring us together, even when we have other political, religious, or other differences, but who are focused on promoting some of the core values that were contained in that original declaration. So that's just a little bit more about the Free Society Coalition. If you want to learn more, you can find them at freesocietycoalition.org, all fully spelled out. And our organization, 1776 Forward, as well as ILV, our co-sponsoring organization, are all members, partner members of FSC. And today we have our first guest under this new mini-series, Marsha Enright, who is one of the founders of Reliance College, previously called Reason, Individualism, Freedom Institute, but they also are one of the Free Society Coalition members. So I'll just give a brief background on Marsha, and then we'll dive into our usual chat. Marsha is an educational entrepreneur, teacher, and writer, has a BA in biology from Northwestern University and an MA in psychology from the New School for Social Research. In 1990, she founded the highly regarded Council Oak Montessori School, which serves children ages 3 to 14, where she was school head for 27 years. In 2005, she founded the Reason, Individualism, Freedom Institute, now renamed recently Reliance College, to develop a new college using an innovative curriculum and methods based on the great books, Socratic discussions, and Montessori principles. She is the president and program director there, and I'm sure we'll learn more. But let's dive in. Marsha, we always like to start off by just hearing our guest's origin story. How did you become an advocate for a free society? Have you always been one? And what does that even mean to you, a free society?
Okay, sure thing. When I was a senior in high school, my classically democratic social studies teacher had what's now called the Nolan chart, where you can graph where you are or where any organization is on personal freedom and economic freedom. So at that time, the 0-0 line, it was all the totalitarians like the Soviets. And it was cut into quadrants with the classic Democrats here. They believe highly in personal freedom, but not so much in economic freedom. And over here, traditional conservatives believe in lots of economic freedom, but low on personal freedom. At that time, the only person in the freedom quadrant, all freedom quadrant, was Ayn Rand. And so he had us read a novel from two of the quadrants, and I read Shoes of the Fisherman by Morris Fishbein in the Democrat quadrant, and then I read The Fountainhead, and I said to myself, wow, this is so much of what I've always thought, but really well organized. So I went out and then I read everything else that she wrote, and eventually that led me into the wider Free Society movement, and I've been there ever since.
Wonderful. I mean, I can resonate with that story. That I read Fountainhead was my first work of Ayn Rand's that I had read too. So that book really resonated, and I had a similar reaction as you in that it felt more. I mean, there were definitely great new revelations, but it also felt somewhat familiar and confirmatory to some of the premises I was already kind of developing implicitly. I'm curious then. So it sounds like you're free for the what does free society mean to you? It sounds like you're kind of defining it as that upper right quadrant. Would it be of kind of max freedom in all dimensions?
Well, let me just say that one of the things that most appealed to me in the Fountainhead was the idea that you should be thinking for yourself about what ideas and values you accept, not just accept whatever's around you, but dedicate yourself to doing that in order to live a good life, and that the essence of a good life is functioning as highly as possible in what you're doing, being creative and productive in what you're doing. So those were some of the basic ideas and values that I took away from it.
Mm,
And ultimately, I ended up agreeing with the idea of a laissez-faire society, that what we need is a society in which individual rights are respected and protected by the rule of law, and otherwise human beings are left free to do what they want as long as they equally respect the rights of others and don't use force on others.
mm.
So, oh, I'm sorry, were you going to, did you
Oh,
have
I was
anything
just
else to say with that?
very well put. No, yeah, go ahead.
No, so I'm then really curious to hear then how you maybe even connect that with your thoughts to the Declaration, because as Chris pointed out, we're coming up to the year where we are celebrating this major milestone for the Declaration of Independence. I think we know it was even such an important document for Rand herself. I believe in her works, had mentioned that she wouldn't have come up with her own thoughts if it hadn't been for the founders and also for the Industrial Revolution. So I'm curious what you think then about this celebration that we're having. Like, do we know even what the founders intended, and what is the importance of that for current society?
Well, unfortunately, the way that the progressives have gotten control of education the last 30, 40 years, many people don't know what the founders did, the amazing achievement that they of the country that they created. Because before this, remember, no country in the world had self-governed, where the people
Right.
living there were the ones who actually made the laws, decided what to do, uh, founded the principles. All the rest of the countries in the world were headed by kings or hereditary monarchs or um, autocrats. There
Mm-hmm.
had been some republics with something like this, but not like we had in the United States. The founders were very, very influenced by many things, but several really important thinkers. One was John Locke, who
Mm-hmm.
was the English philosopher who first came up with the idea of um, why everyone should have equal freedom, and also by the Baron de Montesquieu, who was a French thinker, who had a very interesting book called Spirit of the Laws, in which he had done a study on all governments in previous history and came up with the theory that republics were best in order for people to thrive, but that most of the time they were small, and so they were subject to being taken over by
Domination from others.
empires. And he was very, very influential on the founders. For example,
Mm,
Madison calls him the Oracle.
mm,
And if you look at what Madison did in his construction of the Constitution, he basically made our country be a federation of small republics.
right.
This is under one overarching government that was supposed to, through the Constitution, protect very, very important rights. And then in each state, which was the little republic, all kinds of other issues could be worked out among the people there. And that's why it was called the laboratories of democracy,
Mm-hmm.
because we tried different things in different states. If you don't like the way things are running in Louisiana, you can move to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
You can change where you're going, and then you can try to influence where you're living. So was those ideas, the Montesquieu and Locke, were extremely influential on the founders. And actually, there's a very interesting book that came out a couple of years ago called America's Revolutionary Mind, in which the author had discovered in a letter by John Adams. John Adams said, if you wanted to understand the revolution, you have to look at the private correspondence between the people involved in it in the 15 years prior to the revolution. And if you do, you see that they're all talking about these ideas and many more that were occurring in the Enlightenment. And this very much informed what happened during the revolution. And going back to your issue about the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson basically encapsulates in that declaration the basic individual rights of people, and why the people of the U.S., the colonies, should be separated from Britain.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. I like how you went through that history there, because we talk a lot, Joy and I, in our work about kind of the Age of Enlightenment and Age of Reason thinkers, those kind of from the 16 to the 1800s, who were all developing this corpus of works. And you're right that in many ways, one of the great achievements of the Declaration is that it both synthesized and culminated so much of that thought, and then it put it into action and practice,
Yeah.
which is a big focus of our mission at 1776 Forward, is matching kind of the abstract ideas with actionable implementation.
Mm-hmm.
So I love how you said that, and just thinking through, I think you're right that because we don't learn that history as much anymore, that's part of why understanding what the Declaration was, both as an achievement and its goals and ends, is becoming somewhat of a lost art or knowledge. So maybe let's extend that principle a little bit further. And, it seems like today, maybe it probably is related to this fact that knowledge of the Declaration and our founding values is fraying, but Americans seem to be talking past each other. And one of the core values that we champion, of why we champion free speech at 1776 Forward, is because we see it as a vehicle to overcome those differences, to have civil discourse and exchange ideas in the marketplace of ideas. But not everybody shares that. We seem to be talking past each other. So I'm just curious if you think revisiting principles raised in the Declaration of Independence can help create a more honest and productive discussion in our partisan climate today.
Oh, yeah, I think they're very important. Remember, the First Amendment is free speech. And that's because the founders realized how crucial it was to maintaining a free society. If you think about the history of all the totalitarian societies we've had, and even the ones that are not as totalitarian, they try to control speech. I mean, look at what's going on in Britain, where you can't have hate speech,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the heck that is. I'd love to see a really clear definition. And why is that the case? Well, because in a society of free speech, we get a chance to argue about what's the truth, right? We get a chance to talk about the facts and the values that are involved, and have a kind of opportunity for each person to understand why certain values and facts and ways of doing things are better than others, or to come up with new ways of doing them that are really important. So free speech is a crucial value that we need for a free society. And what was the rest of the question you asked me?
Well, I'll reframe it a little bit. It's really about how can we connect some of those first principles that Jefferson and the founders wonderfully articulated in the Declaration to today's Americans who are trying to find a way to frankly, we'll talk about this in a minute, but to have conversations where they can debate those truths and get back to them, since, right now we seem to be not only talking past each other or not having productive conversations, but to some extent living in total siloed worlds even. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious if you see any touchstones or reference points within the Declaration that might be a way out of that.
Well, I think there's some essential features that are going on. One is that there's been a huge attack by the left, by the what I consider the collectivists, the people that want to live under socialism and communism, the intellectuals of that movement. Huge attack on the idea that there's truth, there's objectivity, or that we can use our reason in order to reach it. And this has been critical in this whole debate, because if you can't come to a rational conclusion about things, if you can't agree on what are the facts and what is the truth, how do you ever come together in understanding each other? And you'll notice that one of the things they have pushed is that the cancel culture is about that, where instead of arguing about or in debating about the different ideas that you have, you just tell the other person they're evil, they're racist, they're whatever, and you shut them up. And that's a part of their intellectual baggage that they have. The progressives, the collectivist left, think that there is no objective reality. They try to push that, and that it's all a matter of social agreement. And so that's, if it's all a matter of social agreement, it's about which group in the society has more power. And they try to gain that power, and they try to shut everybody else up. So that's a problem that's siloing people. And they end up having many implications of that. So that one of the things they do is they try to intimidate people by telling them that they're evil or they're wrong by holding certain beliefs. And that's a way to shut people up. Now, another problem that we have is that people don't know how to come to terms with each other. What do I mean by that? Coming to terms means that when you have a discussion, you remain civil, you listen carefully to what the other person said, and you try to see if you have the same idea. Does reason mean the same to you as it means to me? What is objectivity? What is right and wrong? Do we hold the same values or not? We've kind of lost the ability to really discuss that with each other, and people don't know how to do it. So that's been a big problem too, in my opinion.
I'd like to take this conversation back to this concept of the importance of the quest for truth in a way that respects objectivity, and the fact that as human beings, we are not only emotional beings, but also importantly rational beings, and we need to use our reason. So in the immortal line of the Declaration, we're told that we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident was apparently Benjamin Franklin's edit, I guess, to Thomas Jefferson's original draft. He was, I guess, trying to bring in some of the ideas and influence of Locke. Although I've always thought if it was actually self-evident, we probably wouldn't have needed a declaration or a revolution. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts then on the importance of free speech precisely for this quest for truth.
Well, if you can't talk to each other and you're just in your own mind, you can't learn from the other person. You can't see other perspectives. One of the great things about human beings is that we're able to talk to each other. We're able to learn from each other. We can find out about the other person's experiences. We can hear the way in which they put their ideas together, and that can change the way that we think and we live. You know, it's interesting. I run this summer program every summer, and one of the big emphasis I run a summer program for high school and college students, and one of the big emphases is we have these Socratic discussions in which we help the students figure out the reason and evidence they have for what they believe in and what they think about what we're reading together. And they have to really carefully listen to what the other person says in the discussion and try to respond to them. So what happens is they develop a lot of skill in what's called active listening, which is super useful everywhere in your life. I've had students that came back in 2009 tell me about how they use it in their teams, in their work, because even when you have an engineering problem, you might have different ideas about what the same words mean, and then you're having disagreements because you're using the words differently. You're not understanding the same thing about that. So, and the other thing I wanted to bring in was the emotional side of things. Emotions represent what's important to you and what your values are. And it's so useful to be able to try to become self-aware of those so that you can choose well, do I really believe this? Do I really want to follow this
Mm.
value or not? Do I think this is right? Do I think that's wrong? And have a decent conversation with somebody else about it. So you can, again, come to terms with them about it and come to understanding each other, because understanding is so valuable and it's such a great way to bring people together.
I like that a lot, and I like what you said about emotions too. They are clues to knowledge, but they're not sources of knowledge inherently themselves, right?
Mhm.
They're kind of more clues to something underlying that you then have to actually reflect on and think about. And to your point, then think about whether it makes sense to you or is reflecting a value that you want to value going
Mhm.
forward. So,
Exactly.
so it sounds like you're kind of saying that free speech aids in both conversing with others and self-reflection, both of which are core elements of that process for discovering truth.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of people are going to therapists to try to understand themselves, right? And that
Yeah.
involves speech, and that involves the therapist listening to what they have to say and giving them feedback on it, helping them to become more aware of what's in their own mind and their feelings, why they're feeling what they're feeling.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Definitely a first, and I do agree with it. I like that. So, keeping in the theme of the Declaration and kind of going back, you rightly noted free speech is the First Amendment, and it's the first of the line of freedoms in the First Amendment, right? So it is
Mhm.
first among first, and many. But tying it to the Declaration, it's interesting. You kind of have to read both the Constitution and the Declaration in tandem. They kind of go together as two parts, even though there was almost over a decade between them. And the Declaration famously specifies the unalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Kind
Mhm.
of that immortal phrase that still is arguably the biggest touchstone of kind of the American founding. And then it's not referenced again in that language or those terms in the
Mhm.
Constitution. So how would you connect those three rights to the freedom of speech right?
Well, a couple of things. I think that the Declaration that the men who wrote the Constitution definitely thought that the Declaration was a part of the meaning of the Constitution, because the Declaration sets the basic philosophical ideas and values of the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Constitution implements them. And if you think about it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it frames that the purpose of the government is to protect each individual's right to their own life and their right to their own happiness, their own property, and that the government's job is to protect that. So the it's related to free speech in that we, for example, when we're trying to figure out who owns what property, we have to have free speech about it. Otherwise, how do we even come to terms about that?
Right.
Or if you're trying to arrive at an idea of what is going to give any particular person individual happiness or allow them to pursue happiness. Notice he said pursue happiness, not
Right.
have happiness. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the collectivists think that everybody else is supposed to go around and give people stuff to make them happy. But the Declaration says no, we're supposed to be free to pursue happiness. So each
Mm-hmm.
person can follow their own path and use their own powers in order to achieve it. Well, in order to achieve it, you have to be able to talk and have the opportunity to look at all the possible ideas and know how to interact with other people, have the right to form businesses with them. In order to form a business, you have to talk to other people. So there's
Right.
so many ways in which free speech is really, really critical to a free society.
Yeah, that's well said, and I think that probably explains even a large portion of why the Bill of Rights got added to the Constitution. Right? Is that as they were drafting it and then having these debates, I think they realized that all of these kind of derivative freedoms or rights flow from those kind of three unalienable ones,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted to make it more explicit.
Absolutely. And it's a good thing they did. I mean, sometimes I don't know what would have happened if they didn't have the amendments, because so many of our debates and so many issues about our rights seem to focus on those amendments.
Yeah, for sure. No, yeah, it's. I think about that too, and particularly when there are ever contentious Supreme Court cases,
Yeah.
that does, especially for those who are originalist oriented in terms of reading the document as it was written and intended for, it does provide some clear guidelines, which was the point.
Mm-hmm. Well, the Constitution, many of the things it says in the Constitution is rather abstract. And the good thing about the amendments is they uh, name more specifically what the Constitution should mean.
I think that emphasis on the specifics is so important, and I think it connects perfectly even with something you mentioned that I'd really like to take us back to, which was this importance of the pursuit. You emphasize that it's the pursuit of happiness, and Chris mentioned how in our own work we think so much about how to actually combine the abstract theoretical principles with the actual pursuits, with taking action. So as someone yourself who we've learned in your bio, you certainly done a lot of things to try to build things, to try to inspire others to be entrepreneurial in their thinking and their pursuits. So I would love to hear your thoughts on, we always think of this as our big blue sky question, the question that if you had unlimited time, resources, money, what would you see as the most valuable pursuit that we could all engage in right now that you think would help us to advocate for a free society?
Well, I think what you all are doing right now is wonderful and essential, because I wanted to go back to something that Alexis de Tocqueville said. Alexis de Tocqueville was a French aristocrat who came to the U.S. in 1832, and he observed what was going on here, and he wrote a book on it called Democracy in America, which is an amazing book. If you read it, so much of what he observed in 1832 is still true today, both the positives and the negatives about
Yeah.
what goes on in the U.S. But one of the things he noticed was that the people who founded the U.S. basically were left alone for almost 200 years. They were such a backwater, the colonies were such a backwater that the British Empire didn't bother with them for 200 years, and so they had to be self-governing. And he said that gave them an apprenticeship of freedom.
Mm.
And one of my big concerns is nowadays, not only are young people being taught very destructive ideas, collectivist ideas, telling them that, oh, it's better to have a society in which the government takes care of everything, but they also don't have as much of an opportunity to have this apprenticeship of freedom. One of the results of the apprenticeship of freedom is, to this day, the U.S. is still an amazingly self-organized society. When problems arise, organizations like yours pop up. If there's and when disasters have happened, we see this too, where, oh, we've got FEMA and the federal government is supposed to help these people in a disaster, but you have people from all over the country individually coming and organizations individually coming and helping those people. So I think that having as many organizations as possible, one of the things I'm very optimistic about is I keep seeing more and more things popping up where people are interested in learning about our history, they're interested in learning about the Declaration, they're interested in learning about the Constitution, and also about the ideas that of the Enlightenment and earlier that influenced those things and shaped our world. So that's great. And the other thing is the push to retake education, I think, is so important, because education shapes what young people learn, what they know and what they don't know, and what they come to the table with when they start to be adults.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we do have. There was an interesting book I read years ago by Michael Barone called "Soft America, Hard America," and this was maybe like 25 or 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "How is it that we have all these young people who are all coddled and they have a very easy life, and then when they go into the workforce, they become some of the most productive workforce in the world?" And he said, it's the market that does that. That once they get out of school and they have to face how can I function in a job? How do I need to organize myself? What do I need to learn about economics and finance? that turns them into much more productive people. So again, it's this practical experience is very important. And I think as much as possible, if people can have educational organizations at all levels, preschool to graduate school, that would make sure that the students, I'm not talking about organizations that would tell them, oh, this is the right idea, but ones that teach them how to think well and expose them to the whole panoply of ideas, so that, because the ideas of freedom, facts and reason are on the side of
Right.
ideas of reason. So if you know how to think well and you get exposed to all the history and the full range of ideas, most people will see what is beneficial for them in their life and their family.
And which is freedom, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's certainly at least our contention as advocates and leaders for liberty. I know all of us, so I couldn't agree more. Thank you for that. And um, I like how you said that the soft power, or soft power versus hard power, or
Soft America, hard
soft.
America.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That and this is a great example, I think, even of why economic freedom or the free market matters, and certainly why we believe it's the second core pillar or lever, whatever analogy you want to and metaphor you want to use for a free society, because in some ways maybe that free market system is what is the hard power that gives people an apprenticeship and freedom, even if they don't get it through kind of the
Exactly.
educational and soft side of society, soft America, if you will.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. Any last words before we wrap up on just encouraging that next generation, or anybody, even adults and people who haven't been steeped in an apprenticeship and freedom, to find their voice, to stand up and speak out for their values?
Well, the fortunate thing, as a result of our free speech society and our right to speak free speech, and as a result of the amazing technology that our markets have formed, we now have more opportunities than ever to talk to each other. And it has a lot of negatives, but it has a lot of positives. So I think one of the things people can do is, when they're on the discussions on the internet or in person, to advocate for your values, but always maintain civility. Always try to listen to what the other person says and answer them reasonably. What I tend to do, if somebody starts throwing name calling at me or other kinds of arguments like that, I say to them, well, that's not an argument. What is your argument? And I'll
Yeah,
just repeat that over and over
disarm
again.
them. Mm-hmm.
Because you're not just talking to that person, you're talking to all the people listening. And so if you're being much more reasonable about what you're doing, you're actually trying to talk about the ideas and unpack them, people will listen to that, and people will be influenced by that kind of argument. So that's one way, and there's just so many different avenues these days. I mean, my own is, I've been running a program in the summer for the last 16 years, a week-long program for high school and college students, which is really aimed at developing their reasoning skills, their ability to understand anything themselves, and their independence. And what happens is, by the end of the week, when I have these students, they have an amazing experience of self-confidence and
Mm.
optimism about their future because of it. And the ability then, at the end of the week, they have developed a lot of their ability to understand things themselves. And we're working on opening this into a new college called Reliance College, with the idea that we want to help students become self-reliant. Our motto is, become the entrepreneur of your own life, and that means personally and professionally. So everything in this program is aimed at doing that. We give them a lot of knowledge and thinking skills and writing skills and speaking skills, and then they also have practical experience in their professional areas as part of the program. So this is the kind of thing and there's other colleges that have been popping up, new colleges around the country,
Right.
that are aiming at something like that. I think the more we can get it down into the lower levels of education, where the students are learning to think well and learning a lot of information earlier, not just, and what I mean by that is, the way that a lot of education is focused these days, it's okay, memorize this bunch of information and then take a test and see if you know it. But it's not about whether do you understand what you're learning. And
Right.
understanding is so important to actually implementing it into your life and to recognizing these ideas in the real world. Because these ideas you learn in the classroom, these ideas of all these writers that we have in the past, they shape the world around us. And if
Right.
we want to have freedom, we have to be able to recognize which ideas are out there and are those good for me or not? Do I agree
Right.
with them or not? So
Ideas do move the world, right? And so
exactly.
it's not only understanding the ideas around you and that others are putting forth, but then also asking and questioning whether or not they are correct and make sense, right?
Absolutely.
That's the
Yes.
critical part of the thinking, in critical thinking. So, but it
And
sounds like your program and your college initiative is also another good answer to that question of what to invest in going forward. So it's a good plug here at the end. Thank you for that. We are out of time, and if you do want to learn more about Marsha's college and initiatives, you can find her and them at reliancecollege.org. And as always, you can find us every 2 weeks on ILV's Dissidents podcast channel. This is the Free Speech Forward podcast, and this is our new mini series within the series in partnership with the Free Society Coalition. Again, they're at freesocietycoalition.org, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, Marsha.
thank you for having me.